One of the things that I kind of like about this concept of engagement with students is that, well, part of it's my own experience in that I didn't really understand all the different ways we interact with students until I was really in my role that I'm in now. And when I say all the ways I mean we as the entire institution interacts with students. And some of those things that we do either as an institution or as individuals can be very off-putting toward engagement. And there's other ways that we can do things that are really promoting engagement. And so I kind of wanted to think about this in a strategic way. Earlier on some of the things you also probably saw return on investment as one of the topic areas, which I'm trying to cover at a different point in time. But one of the things I'm actually looking at right now is identifying return on investment on engagement initiatives. And so we're going to be working on that for my home institution here to help us make more strategic decisions. But looking at literature, there's a number of things that we can do that improve student engagement. And a lot of these things are probably all things you're doing already. But I'd also like to think of it as we think about these things, think of them as a system and how does that system work for our students. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk through a couple of these models and things. So let's see. There we go. Did that work? Are we all seeing the right thing?
It's not up right now.
Okay, let's go back. All right. Let's see. Okay. I think now we are working, right?
Yes.
Yay. All right, click. Okay. So are you seeing the slideshow ones? Sorry.
Yeah, it's still in the preview mode. It's not in the
Okay.
presentation mode.
Okay, I'm trying to get it to do this. What? This is so irritating. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and see if I can pull it up. See what's going on with my PowerPoint here. Lovely. Nope. Thank you again. I really appreciate your help. Okay, now we're going to try to do this again. Okay. That's small. Go over to here. Where are we? Okay. Okay, are we good?
Yes.
All right, very good. Great. So I apologize for that. But anyway, so that was just kind of want to introduce the topic there and kind of why it was important. And I don't know if you guys had this at your institutions, but I think you probably did. We saw a great decline in engagement with our students during COVID. And part of that was the rush we had to go to get online. Part of it was we weren't all set up for that very well. Some of our students lacked connectivity. Any number of things really help prevent that engagement. And what we've seen with some of our other students is it continues to linger. Our first year students are acting very differently than our second year students. So it's kind of an interesting time to see what's that's going to look like. But as we talk about engagement, I think there's some things that we ought to think about with why we want to engage. So my whys are somewhat particular in that as an institution, we have to be thinking about recruitment and retention at the same time. Recruitment, of course, is really important, has a lot of fiscal ramifications and things like that. But retention also is very important, partly because our students need to have that degree, right? If they leave here, especially if they leave here with any sort of debt, then they're walking out without a degree to the same earning potential that they had before. And so that's one of those reasons it's kind of the right thing we do to make sure we do that. The other thing is we find that students who engage in their academic institution tend to be better employees. We did a study, it was a while back, we did a study where we were looking at students level of engagement while in college, and then their beginning salaries, and then their salaries 5 and 10 years out. And what we found was the engaged students had the same starting salary as students who we wouldn't consider to be very engaged. However, that grew over time. And so the 5 and 10 year, there were significant differences in how much those people were paid. And so the thought is that some of the things we're teaching them through extracurriculars, through some of our class time, some of those kinds of things about that engagement leads them to be better employees and more rewarded fiscally. I don't know about you, but I can't find a workforce group that I talk to who is saying, oh, I've got plenty of people. I think we have as land grants and non-land grants, we have obligations to our states to really help meet some of those workforce needs. And so getting those engaged students here and being successful is important to those industries as well. There's a couple of conceptual frameworks that we're going to show you today. This is a multidimensional model of student engagement. It basically talks about what leads into engagement. So we start with that sense of being a professional, that I'm now joining this profession. And then we also, on the other side, we have a sense of what the discipline knowledge is, what I'm learning about my own discipline. So those things lead down to the sense of being a professional leads to a sense of transformation, that growth. I know I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm thinking, all of those kinds of things. And I know that that's happening for me as a learner. And then the sense of discipline knowledge leads into a sense of being, which is that confidence, happiness, self-knowledge. Those kinds of things are a sense of being. And then that leads to engagement. So we can think about if we're hitting on some of those other things, that's going to lead to greater engagement. Another model that I think is pretty interesting is this 5 senses framework. And that looks at connectedness, capability, purpose, and resourcefulness, and how that leads to a culture that identifies its clear values. The connectedness part is those relationship things. So it's a relationship to other students, relationship to faculty and staff, and then relationship to the institution and how well I identify with that institution. And that's one of those reasons, we always want to hit those institutional kind of things. We want to brand everybody as a Buckeye around here. So we really want to hit on those kinds of things because we want to build that connection to the institution as a whole. The capabilities are really going to be those participation and community engagement, that they're participating and they're actively part of their learning outcomes, as well as their clubs and things like that. It also really is helpful if you have task and role clarity in that adds to that capability. Right now, we are having an issue on my campus in housing, and because of a lack of leadership, our students who are RAs are really struggling because there's not that clarity on role and task. And so that's something that I'm working with the larger student life group on, getting that better clarity for those students. Another capability element is academic competence. Do they feel that they are growing their capabilities and competence in the areas that they're studying? The purpose is going to really be about discovering engagement opportunities. What is their vocational drive? What's their personal development that they're trying to see and work on? And resourcefulness is sort of that university life interface. So we've got the physical environment, but we also have access to our systems and navigation of those systems, and how well they're able to navigate helps them feel that they have more resourcefulness. And it also would add into capability as well. So engagement really starts while we're doing the recruitment process. It's not apart from that. Every time we have a summer camp, that's an engagement point for us. And so recognizing that these are ways that we're onboarding students. We all know when you have a faculty visit, when you have a campus visit, you are most likely going to get that student. And I know that we've often had ones that would go down the K-State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech corridor to see where they felt like they fit the best. And that's, because we're all working to engage those students. So a lot of that can happen with our admissions and recruitment staff. And one of the things that's nice about my institution is that I supervise the director of admissions. And that's great, because that way the admissions staff really knows what's going on academically. The academics are also better engaged with what they're doing from the admissions standpoint and things like that. Although there's always room for improvement, and I certainly think we could do that too. But I think there's a lot that happens because we are very knowledgeable about what each other is kind of working through there. Summer programs are also another great way to engage students. All of those 4-H contests and FFA contests and the opportunities they have to come on campus, another great ways to engage with students. And then there's other things like social media, helping them get involved with your own social media, promoting them. I think the Tag to Teach Ag has been such a really neat campaign that has done a lot of work. It's really getting those students, making them feel that they're very much part of it already. In the classroom, certainly feedback is super helpful. And that's a way to engage with students. I'd say one thing is, don't assume they know how any of our systems work. And I say that because we're always onboarding new students. And I particularly feel this because I'm at a 2-year school. So I don't have 3rd and 4th year students to help teach them. So we're always onboarding and teaching them how to use our systems and everything. Another thing that students can do is contribute content on their own, either because you assign it or you utilize it in the classroom. One of my landscape faculty she's just really great. She gamified her plant ID class. So it was Plants versus Zombies. Now it's the Worcester Witch Project. But one of the things that she does is she has the students on their phones the whole time during class, and they're contributing content. So when we have something to look up or we have a question, everybody gets to it, and then they can actually connect with the projector and show it to the rest of the students. She does that really, really well, and those students do feel very engaged with it. Using any automation you have to monitor progress is a good way to kind of measure what kind of engagement is going on. Or if you have other, how many times they visit the library, if you have counts like that, if you have how many times they access tutors, those kinds of things can also be useful in monitoring progress. And the last thing I bring up is celebrating wins. Just because it's so important for them to keep going. And if we can celebrate a little win for them, maybe that's going to help them go down that path and persist. Now, some other things that I think are important is in our whole systems, and how do we do that? Be welcoming, and that means everybody. So a few years ago, I first kind of came into this role. And I have to say, our orientation during our summer for our new 1st-year students was not fun. In fact, it was like opposite. It was a painful day. And And so after the first one, I didn't make any changes, but then after the second one, we made significant changes. And I remember when we were meeting to talk about this, one of the people said, well, it's not a fun day. And I'm going, well, it sure isn't for our students right now. and so, but we need to make it. I mean, this is still a yield event. And I think if we look at that, is all of these things are yield events, right? They're all times when we can be working to yield students. I think being available, and that's mean my library staff need to be available, my academic team needs to be available. All of the folks, including our faculty, need to be available to them, and meeting them kind of where they are. As much as possible. I will tell you, so at OSU, our official way of communicating with students is through our OSU email system. Now, we all know students hate email. So what we have done is when we have an important email going to them, we will send them a text message through our OnCourse system and say, look at your email. And it's really funny because you can see the open rate just goes way up when we send the student group the OnCourse text message. Using student of concern systems, those are really helpful too, especially when you've got a student who is experiencing some kind of crisis, or maybe it looks like they're in crisis, maybe they're not, but if you can use those student of concern systems at your institutions, that's really helpful. The reason I call it student of concern is because our system is the student of concern, and when we put in a concern, it can come from anybody. It can come from a faculty member, it could come from a tutor, it could come from our psychologist. It can come from lots of different places, but what it does is it alerts others in the system, hey, there might be something going on with this student, we better check it out. And then our whole support staff that is in that area engages with that process, and we try to suss out what's going on, and those kinds of things can really help. One of the things that we've been able to do also is we've developed a student emergency fund that's over $100,000. And it really has assisted students when they've had a fire, when they've had car issues, things like that, that really help them with things, because life just happens. So having that kind of buffer is pretty nice. And it's not a real bureaucratic system to use either. So that's very helpful. Aligning with student life, again, that's something I really learned about since I've been in my role now here, because student life reports to me, and then I coordinate with student life in Columbus as well. So we have, we want to focus on the same dimensions of wellness that they do. We want to make sure that we're developing our students in a very cogent model similar to what they're experiencing with the Columbus students. So we really are trying to do that. And if you kind of know what your student life group is trying to achieve, that's really helpful. I don't know if it's changed now, Jason, but I know when I was at K-State and our former head of student life was there was a real disconnect between what student life was doing and what we were doing on the academics. And it was, I think part of it was that they wanted to kind of keep it away from us. Whereas I felt like there was always things that we could do to help engage students in the same things that they're working toward. And that's what we're trying to do here.
And there's been a big shift in that direction of getting the two connected and having faculty and administration engaged in that entire process, and resources and restructure, and having them talk to department head meetings and all those different aspects.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, much better connection.
I'm really glad to hear that. I am really glad to hear that. That's great. One of the things too, another helpful little tool is peer tutors, and I'm going to spend just a little time here talking about what peer tutors do. So in my institution, we have what we call the Learning Lab. And so we find students who have done well in classes, and then we work them and onboard them as to becoming peer tutors. And it does some neat things regarding those things about connectedness for students and how that leads to that student engagement. For the learners, that tutor gets to be a role model. It shows them this is how I can be academically successful. This is, modeling behaviors, things like that. It also immediately builds a connection to a student. So that student to student relationship is really nice and added there. We do this. One of the things that we require of our students who are in who have not placed well in English is they are required to work with our student tutors in a co-requisite class, and faculty still oversee it, but they're engaged very highly with those students. And it does a couple of things. One is help them with their discipline knowledge and learning about what they need to be doing to be successful in their English classes. But then it also establishes that relationship with someone who really seems to be connected and caring. I think it's the experience with using peers as mentors will also aid as they transition to the workplace, so that they know that they can look towards someone who maybe has been in this office or in this company for a little bit longer than me, and they will help me transition into my job. There's also a sense of connection, capability, resourcefulness, because you're using those sources. And it helps with that sense of academic identity. I know where my role is in this institution, and I might even see a pathway to move forward. It's almost like those peer tutors. It's almost like seeing folks work in a research group, right? It starts, that's modeling that behavior, and you can see how they want to aspire to be in this other role. And for the tutors, they get to have this really strong connection to faculty and staff. And it's a different kind of connection because they're working with them side by side. I had the coolest experience last year with this young woman who she's pre-vet, and she's now in Columbus. But I named her my outstanding student last year, and she had on her own in her anatomy and physiology class, she would go to the instructor, find out where the class was and what was not working well for learners. And then she had to set up a small group where she would go through and help with the content and tutoring them on the content. And I just thought that was so neat to see that initiative. But it also helped because she'd already had a strong relationship with the faculty members. I think it's really neat because the tutors that I also speak to, they really feel invested in their learners, that they really want them to be successful, that they see a lot of value and pride in their learners being successful. And through that peer tutor program, they're obviously a very engaged student, which helps with their own retention and improves their engagement as well. A lot of times I'll see my peer tutors who are also ambassadors, or, they're leading clubs and going to AFA and things like that. So I think all of those kinds of opportunities for students are a great way to look at engagement. So with that, I just wanted to kind of pick your brains and kind of see what you think are some of the key experiences you've had with student engagement, and how might that change, good or bad, as we emerge from the pandemic. What are things that might be helpful? I just kind of as a brainstorming, because I really value all you folks, and I feel like there's some great ideas that come out of this, these kind of meetings. So there we are. Let's see, I'll see what's in the chat. Oh, how are you defining engaged? Well, that's a really good point. So the way we look at engagement is how much they are participating in their classrooms, how much they're participating in our student life activities, how much they're participating in ongoing other trainings. So like we'll have bystander training to work to help address bias and things like that. What students are showing up there, and is that number increasing? And like I said, it's really interesting. We see a real different pattern from our first year students than we've seen in our second year students. The second year students, I think, are just, that 2 years was a bigger impact on them. Now, I will say we have an impact on our first year students, and that their math skills are not as good as we would like to see. However, I think that they're present, so they're working through those things, which is great.
Chris and Erica may have to chime in since I've been out this semester, but we really struggled to get students back engaged in student organizations.
Yeah.
And I hope it's getting better, but it just didn't happen during COVID. And then that model and that like culture just kind of dissipated. So what have you seen, or what suggestions do you have as we start to try to re-engage our students in that way?
Well, I'll tell you what, because same thing here, absolutely the same. And I found that they seemed exhausted, right? And we just couldn't, even we have a student leadership council, and I meet with them periodically. And they were all talking about that too, is they were talking about how they couldn't get people to come to their club meetings and things. And so in some ways, I'm not sure like what I can do with my second year students. So we're really, we're working the first years and seeing if we can bring those second years along. But it's kind of like having a muscle you haven't used in a long time. And then all of a sudden we're wanting them to use it. And that's been, it's just been so interesting, because like our student activities fair when we're onboarding our new first year students was huge. And we had tremendous turnout and everything, as compared to last year, we did not. And I don't know of a way to loop in those second year students other than having your fourth year students or your master students doing some outreach to move them along. With our situation, since we don't have those other categories, we do have graduate students on our campus, but they don't intermingle very much at all with the undergraduates.
Thank you.
Have you seen a big change, or what change have you seen in like student engagement in like extracurriculars this fall? One thing we've noticed, last year we were quote semi-normal. We just had face coverings last fall until beginning of March. This year it's like normal, right? Everything's back to the way it is. And we've seen, I think, an increase in my anecdotal evidence of more students just actually getting out and getting back into the extracurriculars, the club meetings, the functions and activities, not I'm going to come to campus for class and then I'm leaving and not getting involved in any other ways.
Yeah, it's the same here. That's what we're seeing as well, is that we've seen just a real increase of usage of and when I say engagement too, it's even like using our peer tutoring lab, using the library, those kind of things, because the more they do those things, they tend to be successful. And I think that we're seeing that same pattern. In some ways, for me, what I'm trying to sell back to my faculty and staff is that concentrate on the first years, and hopefully some of the second years will come along once they see, that fun things are happening. And I think it's really improved during the course of the semester. One of the things that really hurt us was our student life leader left at the beginning of the semester for another job. and our housing coordinator also left. And that kind of, those two people worked really closely together on a lot of things, a lot of engagement activities. And so that's been a bit of a challenge. We're still doing a lot of things, but I don't think we're doing it as well as we need to be. And we'll be hiring in those positions here really soon. So yeah, I think it's really tough, but I think managing some expectations is kind of important there too, because you know, it would be kind of crazy for us to expect that those second year students would just automatically understand the value of being engaged.
Yeah, well, they came out of high school in the end of, the
Yep.
COVID age, came into college in the COVID age, and just got out of, it's like they got out of the habit of being involved. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, we also saw at the beginning of this semester more mental health issues. And they did in Columbus as well, because I was alerting people to some of that. And so we did some training prior to the semester starting about disruptive and what do we call it? Disruptive and something students.
intrusive advising.
Well, it's kind of like intrusive advising, but it was really like identifying signs when a student is either being disruptive or if they're a danger. And what does that look like, and who are the resources, and really just reminding people about that. And we also had a REACH training, which is our suicide prevention training as well. And just kind of being attuned to these are some challenges the students are having, and trying to make sure we're using that student of concerns things because of those students. Oh, okay. Elisa says that she's seeing the mental health issues too. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
Sorry, I look a little disheveled because this bookcase behind me, I have been assembling today. But yeah, I think that I have had, like I said in the chat, I've had probably at least one student a week. If you average it out, some weeks I haven't had any, some I've had more. But I have had a lot of students that have needed help, and that has ranged. I'm teaching a writing course that services students across the college, and so I have freshmen, I have seniors.
Yeah.
And so that's all the way across the board. I
Wow.
do think I've had particularly sophomores, the second year students, talk to me about how difficult things were, particularly where we have a lot of students who were in Nashville, and we have a lot of students who are from Memphis or from Atlanta or from Chicago or St. Louis. And so we have a lot of students who they're away from home for the first time. And those sophomores in particular, last year was their first year away from home. And the 2 years before that, they were in online school. They weren't leaving their mom and dad's house or whoever the guardian is. And so then I had a conversation with a student the other day about her grades really slipped last year because it was her first time really away from home. And so now she's really struggling this year because she's trying to fight back from having that happen. And so I think I think I'm seeing it freshmen to seniors, but I think that those second year students, it's really an interesting thing. But the first year students as well, basically all of their high school experience was not normal.
Right.
So they are having to figure out what college looks like when they didn't have a normal high school experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think something that kind of combines with that is that, the social cost of engaging, right? And that can be really scary if you haven't been, using that muscle, right? And so they're away from home. They're being asked to be interactive. And there's some anxiety that comes with that.
And I imagine there's some research that supports that students who are more engaged in all of these opportunities are better able to cope or have more, all in that framework you showed earlier, have that sense of belonging or, and I hadn't really, until we started talking through this, really reflected on, my own experience as a student and then how I've felt the past few months being displaced and put in, a new situation and how those social connections and relationships are so vital to helping those students feel connected. So I don't know if there's a question in there other than, is there more that we can be doing to help encourage our students to get engaged because of some of those benefits?
I don't have a great answer for that, but I can tell you what we are trying to do is be more intentional about it. So like everything we do, particularly around orientation, is to establish the expectation that you are going to come in and be an engaged student. And we established that with the parents session too. And one of the things, so I wear these really sparkly sneakers. And one of the things that I thought was really nice is this one mom called me earlier in the year because her student was struggling with something, and she said, I kept telling him, go see the lady with the sparkly shoes, she's going to help you. so I do think that that getting those messages not only to their supporters but also to the students, that we want to have that expectation that you're going to be engaged, because you're going to do much better if you're taking advantage of these things. And I think that the other thing is being intentional about it with your faculty and staff, helping them understand that the more relationships these students build, the greater they're going to be in resiliency. And that's borne out by national data. They're more likely to persist to a degree if they are, say, working in somebody's lab. It could even not even be their discipline, but it's engaging with people who work on their campus, and it's that engagement with students and engagement with the faculty and staff as well. And I think being vocal about these things, that these are the things we're doing, and here's what we're working to achieve, so that everybody in the institution is sort of getting that same idea. So right now we're going through a strategic planning process, and I've pulled in some of these other concepts so that we all are looking at that, not just as the strategic plan is including these ideas about engagement in it.
Thank you.
And I think sharing personal stories can be good too, about your own engagement. First couple of years when I was in college, I wasn't particularly engaged, and then I became very engaged. And a lot of it was because I went from a situation where I didn't feel very welcome to one where I was very welcome to Texas Techers. And all of a sudden it really radically changed my college experience. And I think sharing things like that with students is helpful too.
Yeah, that's great. I often share with them that I got my college job through someone I met in a student organization. So working at the International Grains Program happened because I met someone who worked there. And well, I'm glad Texas Tech gave that experience to you. We still try
Absolutely.
to do that today.
Yeah, you share those experiences of the connections. Like I've repeatedly talked about being an ACT, and I heard an internship presentation there. So I applied and I got the internship, which then that led to connections for my first job, and then the snowball. A lot of times I feel like I get the feedback of, well, but that's for you. How often does that really happen? Is that really what's okay, so you traveled halfway across the world and you stepped into a place and you saw an alum from your program on Thanksgiving, right? Okay, so how often does that really happen to people? And see, I sometimes get a little bit of skepticism, I think, from students who are like, well, but that's not really how it works. That's just a unique instance that you're trying to use to promote your club.
Well, the other thing is using the student to student thing. you know, that's, you know, one of the nice things about recruitment is if you can get the students in front of them, that makes a huge difference, huge difference. So maybe just helping the students be articulate about that. You know, I'm sure you have them in your intro classes and things like that, so they can talk about their experiences and how that involvement with ACT or other groups really changed things for them.
Chris, real quick on the faculty piece,
Mhm.
are your faculty recognized for the time that it takes to complete these activities?
So we do have that as part of our, our documents called the Appointments, Promotion and Tenure Document, APT, and it is recognized in there. One of the things that I'm changing is a little bit of just not being associated with your club, but other system-wide events, because our faculty tend to let our staff kind of carry the weight on that. But it is the student involvement is very much an important part of what our expectations are with our faculty and with our staff. But you know, it's rolled into the evaluation process. Another thing that I would say we've rolled into the evaluation process too goes to that culture piece and that on the values. Our college has established its principles of community. And we've started teaching our the first, you know, that first year seminar type class that you have your first semester. We've embedded those principles of community into that. And then I've included it into my staff evaluation form. And we're looking at ways that we can include it into our faculty evaluation.
Thank you.
And if those things are something that you feel like is missing in your own departmental documents, you should vocalize that and say, hey, I think we ought to be looking at this because I don't feel like these things take a lot of time. You know, it needs to be valued, and the faculty are in charge of that document. So, I mean, like I'm rewriting mine now, but it's based on what faculty tell me. So